This involved Laurent Robert, who was one of those players a lot of fans will remember, and he's one of those players that was either wonderful, sensational, or was you tear your hair out because he did everything off the cuff, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. Now, this day, at the end of a game, we filed down into the press room, and we're all in the press room, getting ready for Bobby coming out. And all of a sudden, the door bursts open, and Laurent Robert, still in his kit, completely in his kit, with sweat rolling off him, comes storming in with his eyes bulging out. And it was obvious he'd just come straight up the tunnel. Instead of turning right into the dressing room, turned left and come up into the press room. And he made a beeline for a colleague of mine who was in the press room and had him pinned up against the wall. He was obviously going to plonk him one. Luckily for Robert, and even more luckily for the journo that he had up against the wall, a couple of players had seen Robert take this turn, thought, whoops, I know what Laurent's going to do. And they had chased him in, so they dragged him off and got him away into the dressing room. Now, as you can imagine, that caused something of a buzz amongst the press lads. And into this, quite innocently, walks Bobby Robson, ready to take his press conference, who had no idea what had happened, of course, but hacks on going to miss the chance of a good story, and said, "Excuse me, Bobby, you do know that one of your star players has just rushed into this room and had one of the journalists up against the wall with his fist poised like the trigger of a gun. What do you make of all that, like?" He said, "Laurent Robert, why? Who was he going to hit like?" And the pressman asked him the question, told him, and he said, "No." He said, "It's a case of mistaken identity." He said, "As if it mattered, of course. It's a case of mistaken identity." He said, "Laurent didn't mean to hit him." He said, "He meant to hit John Gibson." So I'm sitting in the back here, and I went, "What?" Bobby said, "Let me explain." He said, "Gibbo wrote something in the Chronicle last night." He said, "I read it, actually." He said, and he was given the pros and cons of Laurent Robert's career, saying what he does that's brilliant and unlocks the door, but equally what he does that's absolutely frustrating. So one of the journalists says to Bobby, "Well, so he would take objection to this, did he?" He said, "Well, probably he did." And he said, "But I thought it was a very balanced piece." He said, "I've had this out with Robert myself about what he doesn't do at times." He said, "But obviously he'd seen this article and he wanted to smack Gibbo, but he got the wrong guy, because the guy he got had silver hair like mine, you see." So the next day, I'm actually the headlines in the national newspapers. But innocently, Bobby had caused all this absolute chaos. And then afterwards, when I talked to him about it, he said, "Don't worry about it, Gibbo." He said, "It doesn't really matter. There was no harm done. He didn't smack." And he said, "Oh, by the way, you're absolutely right what you said about Robert." He said, "It's the greatest challenge I've ever had as a manager since I had Romario, which is the superstar Brazilian, who he had when he was Barcelona." He said, "I fight him every day to get him to do the right things." And he says, "By the time I knock him into shape, I'll be 126 years old." But some of the things he said like that was absolutely marvellous with Bobby. He was so lovable.